It's interesting because when we're talking about where something fits, Purple's got a couple issues. Purple, their first comparison is to themselves. That's a hard thing to live up to. You are now in the 80s, 11 years later, and you're comparing to one of the best 3 or 4 year runs by any hard rock band in history. Okay, you still got it. Where are you? Can you bring the goods? Are you this good anymore? Are you over the hill? Are you done? Are you washed up? And then we have to talk about the environment in which they were existing at the time. And this is just a tiny, tiny list. And I don't even have to give the band names. Defenders of the Faith, Slide It In, Out of the Cellar, Love at First Sting, Grace Under Pressure, Last in Line, Purple Rain, Power Slave, Tooth and Nail, Warning, all released the same year. So now they've got a lot more competition. And when you look at something like We Are retro-wise, especially all these years later, you can't ignore the things that were out with them. And you say, well, let's just forget Deep Purple for a moment. How did Perfect Strangers compare just with what it came out at the time?
Yeah, well, I think sonically this sounds like a 70s album with some embellishment of the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the questions I was going to raise with you is, did they leave the reunion a little late? Now, I'll put a couple of riders on this. This album went to number 5 in the UK, number 19 in America, platinum, and in Australia, number 19. So it charted really well. It sold well. The tour in America was gangbusters, only second to Bruce Springsteen.
Bruce Springsteen. Right.
Now, that's amazing. They weren't playing little theatres. They were playing big concert venues.
Yeah, for us, they came through and played the Alpine Valley in East Troy, Wisconsin.
It was a blockbuster,
massive tour.
But I'm saying that the album, instead of being platinum, if it was released in, say, 82 or 81,
okay,
how big would have been the reunion? I suspect it would have been even bigger. I think they may have left the reunion maybe 1 or 2 years too late. That's just my opinion. If they did it a little bit earlier, I think it would have been even bigger. What do you think?
I don't think, because here's the problem with doing it in 84. Just that list that I talked about, there's, how is Perfect Strangers going to compare with Last in Line?
It's different music.
Yeah. Well, they are very different, but that's where the hard rock was going. Tooth and Nail, Out of the Cellar. There was this microcosm so was Purple heavy enough to compete in that camp? No, I don't think. That's not where they fit because they're not a heavy metal band. They never were. So earlier in the decade, the compositions and the strength of melody and players probably fits in better with what's surrounding it at the time.
I agree, like REO Speedwagon, Billy Squier, Journey.
Yes.
Styx. When those sort of AOR rock bands were very big, and I'm not saying Deep Purple are AOR, but in that sort of ballpark, on the periphery, I think this album would have done much better in 81, 82. Just before glam, those LA bands, heavy metal.
Yeah. And, timing is everything. And the question then becomes, what type of legs did it have? it didn't take long for the warts and the arguments, and I mean, it just didn't take long. You know, House of Blue Light was a challenged record to be polite. We hinted at the horrible release of Nobody's Perfect, and no crap. It's not perfect. It's hideous, in my opinion. And the warts and everything are there, and it's not very much longer than that. The battles just, as they say metaphorically, rage on.
Well, that's why my suspicion, if some members of the band have extra incentives, that they can ply their weight a little bit more and say, hey, this is the direction I want to take the band, and it becomes less of a democracy. And when it comes to the crunch, the thing that pulled this band apart was the battle between Gillan and Blackmore. It wasn't the other folk.
No. Mm-mm.
They were the alpha males, and that was the cause of the demise, basically.
Let me suggest this to you. Ronnie just left. Ronnie's out. Instead of doing Down to Earth, Deep Purple reunites and releases Perfect Strangers.
It would have worked. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Sonically.
Yeah. I think it would have.
Mm.
Now, you say there's no Jolyn Turner now, and there's obviously the timelines are different. But I'm suggesting that what Richie would have been motivated on a couple fronts. One, Ronnie's gone, and that camp is imploded. He wants to go more commercial. Well, Perfect Strangers, and we've already talked about it, and Knocking at Your Back Door was on a lot. That easily can replace a Since You've Been Gone or All Night Long, right?
Mm.
I see those as superior to those.
Mm.
And now Purple hasn't been gone as long as they've been gone. And again, if you start the decade and say, well, Deep Purple's back, that's a different mindset versus coming in the middle of the decade and going, oh, it's been since the 70s. That seems like forever. It's just like, it's so far removed. It's too far gone. Now, I mean, you could also have, and we've talked about how much we love them, were probably people who were like, you know what? I enjoyed everybody right where they were.
Yeah. Well, that's the counter argument, that you preserve the legacy by not having a reunion ever.
Correct.
And I always come back to the Beatles. No reunion, legacy preserved. Yeah. Despite all the little odd tracks that have come out in the the last 10 to 20
Zeppelin
years.
played one show. And how many millions of people were going, give me tickets, who couldn't even get there? One show. And Plant was smart enough.
Talk about Live Aid.
Well, no, but they admit that was a joke.
Yeah.
They didn't practice. They didn't take it seriously. They didn't rehearse. And they had two drummers who didn't know the songs.
Train crash.
Yeah. But the O2, they were on fire. And you're like, okay, I get it. And that was a band who even a much longer period of time had gone by, and you're like, okay, do you still have it? Do you still have it? Not only do they still have it, they killed it. But they didn't have to release a record. They didn't a studio record. They didn't have to, and kudos to Plant, because as much as people want to dog him for, oh, could you turn down all that money? Because again, it's what I said before. It was Purple versus Purple. All it was Led Zeppelin versus Led Zeppelin. And current Robert Plant is going to lose to old Robert Plant. Every time. He will lose. You can't win that fight. And you're best not to even get in the ring.
I think that if you call it quits and you don't have a reunion, the mystique is preserved, the legacy is preserved, and people are hungry. It's that sort of feverish, will they get back together? And therefore, the band can put material, bonus tracks, reissues of reissues of reissues, and people just lap it up.
Right.
But there's nothing worse where there's a reunion and the magic's gone or diluted, or it's 3/5 of what it was.
Or you perceive it that it was done for less than artistic motives. Right? If you think they're doing it simply as a cash grab, and I'm going to use the police as an example, they were always at the top of the list of the most wanted reunion. We got to have a police reunion. Got to have it. Got to have it. Got to have it. And they do it. And we find out in this age of social media and everything, these guys just absolutely freaking hate each other.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, you got a sense of it, but now you're swimming in it. And you're like, oh, so now you're going to go play nice on stage and you're going to play your little set because you're all getting racked in with so much freaking money because you made. And then where's your studio record? Where's the next tour?
I think it damaged the legacy, because I think there was a lot more. But prior to the reunion, there was a lot more talk about the police, how influential they were, and this and that. I think the reunion killed it. People don't talk about it. I think they kind of erased themselves, mostly out of pop culture.
How many people talk about the Eagles post Hell Freezes Over in a positive light?
Mm.
They ruin ticket prices. We find out that Fry and Henley are narcissists and complete control freaks. And you're like, no, they would have been better off never getting back together and let everybody just keep wanting.
I'll give you another example, and this is completely off genre for you and I. ABBA.
Absolutely.
That was the most feverish. They've got to get back together. Those record companies were throwing millions, multiple millions at those guys.
Yeah.
They finally got back together, did an album. It stank, didn't do that well, and people don't talk about it as much. I know they've got this wonderful AI show in the UK, and there's certain areas of the world where, they're still, but they're not spoken about in the same light pre-reunion to where they are post-reunion. So I think a reunion can kill your legacy if it's not done right or properly.
And when Richie left, you got the sense, I certainly did, that all of a sudden it was about making music again with Deep Purple. And that was noble to me. And at that point, I didn't feel like their legacy was, they were being challenged anymore. There's always the where's Richie, no black, no purple kind of mentality. Now, side note, if they had found Simon Burke, when Steve Morris joined the band, we may have an entirely different legacy of albums, because holy crap, are they on fire now. But those albums were made from musicians who were happy, content, thrilled to play with each other. And they're like, hey, I'm not fighting the Machine Head legacy anymore. We're just...
I love those albums, but there's no danger. I like the danger.
No, they're safe.
I like the unpredictability. Like,
yes.
I've seen Purple with Morse a ton of times.
Yeah.
I know what I'm going to get. But with Richie, is it good Richie, bad Richie? Is he going to hit somebody over the head? I like the danger, the unpredictability. And that's what you get with Blackmore. And that cannot be replaced.
No.
It's charisma. It's the X factor.
Yeah. It's that gapers, you're on the other side and you see an accident, you got to slow down and look, because it's just morbid. Yeah. But you have to look anyways. And that was the whole point. It was like, and Lars at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame said it best, almost aloof in this electric narcissism. It's perfect description of Richie Blackmore. You're like, is he gonna light himself on fire tonight? I mean, is he gonna jump off the stage? Is he gonna punch a road guy? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Those early Who shows were dangerous. You had no idea what was gonna happen.
Yeah. Well, I think we both agree it's a solid comeback album. And I also think we agreed that maybe the timing was 1 or 2 years a bit late, but it was so successful on a touring perspective, but it could have been so much more if it was just done a couple of years earlier, say 80, 81. You've said 79. I would subscribe to that as well.